Welcome to the OGLES channel. Thanks for watching today. Let's talk about one of the best From Software games, and actually just one of the best games of all time today, Bloodborne. And in particular, we're going to talk about the bosses in Bloodborne, because these are some of the best bosses any of the Soulsborne games have ever come out with, even all the way through Elden Ring. These are still some of my all-time favorite bosses, and I absolutely adore them. So today we're going to rank all the bosses in Bloodborne from easiest to hardest, and granted, most of them are already pretty hard to begin with, but there's definitely some easier ones in the game. So let's get started. Coming in last place is going to be the Witch of Hemwick Lane, and is she grotesque? Yes. Is she annoying? Yes. Is she creepy as all get out? Yes. However, she's also very, very slow, and she's also very, very weak. The best attack that she has, where she sort of pulls you off to the side, does a little stab move, but you're sure to survive this almost every single time, and then you can get your health back by attacking her immediately afterwards. She also can summon these little demons that sort of meander around the little battlefield here, but truth be told, they're not very fast either, and they can be avoided to simply go after the witch, and once you kill her, they all disappear. This is the easiest battle in the game, and it belongs nowhere else but last place. In 20th place, we have the Celestial Emissary, and once again, this is an extremely easy boss and almost feels like a break for the player right before you get to go in and fight EBRIETAS, which is a very difficult boss in the game. But basically, you have all these little alien creatures here, and at first, it's just a bunch of small ones, just regular enemies, and they sort of chase you around, you sort of kill them off one by one, and then a giant one pops out of the ground, but then you realize it's almost no more powerful than the regular little aliens that are running around. He has got some stomp moves and a little bit wider range on it, but truth be told, you can have him taken out in no time. Honestly, it feels like a boss that's sort of there to boost your self-esteem a little bit before you go in and fight a major boss once you go through the little glass area. But second to last place fits very well for the Celestial Emissary. In 19th place, I'm going to go ahead and put the Moon Presence on here. And yes, I know he's the last boss in the game and it's an alternate quest line. However, he is just a pushover compared to all the other bosses that come before him. And when you get to him, he's just such a letdown as far as like difficulty goes. Yes, he is awesome looking. Yes, his attacks are amazing looking. But there's just nothing really special about him compared to like a normal beast fight in the game. Yeah, he has that one attack that shoots out that bright light that can take away a lot of your health. But at this point, you probably have such a large health bar, it's not going to kill you in one hit, and you get right back in there, start slicing away. I love this boss, I love the way he looks, but he's just not a difficult boss. So third from the bottom fits perfectly for the Moon Presence. In 18th place, we're going to go with another boss. It's like almost in-game boss here. We're going to go with MERGO'S Wet Nurse. And yes, this boss can get a little confusing when she like duplicates herself, puts a fog throughout the entire boss arena here. But if you just simply avoid that and wait for her to reappear as just a singular boss, at that point, her moves are so easy to bait out or simply get behind her and get so many slashes in that she's just such a piece of cake. It's honestly just a waiting game for the most part. Wait out the one difficult move, and then you can just simply bait out all the other moves and have her taken out in no time. MERGO'S Wet Nurse is definitely one of the easier bosses in the game. And up next, we're going to jump back to the very first boss in the game and go up to Cleric Beast here. Now, when you first get to this boss, it's pretty much a gut check for most players, because you're going through the little village here, you're feeling pretty darn confident about yourself, and this giant beast just sort of jumps over the background, lands on this little bridge here, and has this massive area of attack with his arm swings. And you really aren't prepared for it at first, but if you just simply get in there, really slice away, and sort of watch the legs a little bit, and work in your dodge move, you can have him taken out pretty quickly, but it's definitely a boss that sort of teaches players how to play this game, as far as like having to move fast, having to work on that dodge, having to go back in there, get those slices after you're attacked. And it's very much like a tutorial boss in the game, so it's not going to rank super high, but for a tutorial boss, it's way harder than most of the tutorial bosses for the other Souls games. So it's not going to be last place, and I feel like 17th is a pretty safe spot for the Cleric Beast. Now in 16th place, I'm going to put MICOLASH, Host of the Nightmare, and I know a lot of players might rank him a little bit higher, but to me, he's not difficult, he's just really, really annoying. And what I mean by that is when you're trying to get him to go into the first little area here, and you're running him up the stairways, down the stairways, across the little hallway here, and you're trying to give him this little passageway here, it just takes forever. And when you do finally get him in there, these little skeletons who are trying to fight against you as well, that's annoying. And then he has that massive tentacle attack that can almost take you out in one shot. That's also annoying, but once you really figure out like how to bait him into that room, you figure out how to take the skeletons out pretty easily, and you figure out how to avoid the tentacle attack, he's really not that hard. And I know it just sounds like I listed a lot of things to learn to do to defeat this boss, but all of those things are actually pretty simple, and you sort of have to make sure you execute them every single time before he goes into stage 2. And even stage 2, he's really not that difficult, it's just simply getting him to fall into one particular area, and then once again it's a one-on-one fight with him, and you really only have to worry about avoiding the tentacle attack and a little attack where he shoots out all these little lasers at you. If you can avoid both of those, it's basically like fighting a regular NPC, and I just really don't think he's that hard, I just think he's really annoying. In 15th place, we have Rom, the vacuous spider, and as cool as the spider looks, he's not as cool as the spider in Bloodborne 2, the Duke's der Freyha. That's just a way more awesome spider, but still, Rom's pretty cool looking here. And so there's basically 2 phases of Rom. Stage 1 is super easy, just take out all the little small spiders around her and then continue to attack her, and then she disappears and reappears, and there's a ton of spiders around her, and she does all these magic moves to bring things down from the sky or from the ground up to attack you, and she's definitely more difficult in the second phase, and there's no reason to kill off all the spiders because they just continue to reappear throughout the entire battle. It just becomes a timed attack of when you can run in there, get a few slices, and run away. If you stay too long, you're sure to die, so it's really just simply timing yourself out, running in there, running back, running in there, running back, and that's really what the battle boils down to in the long run. It's not going to take the most skilled player to defeat Rom, but it's definitely going to take a patient player to defeat Rom. In 14th place here we have AMYGDALA, and honestly AMYGDALA is a massive beast to fight against, and she is significantly harder in the Chalice dungeons, but in the main game here, she's a pretty mid-tier boss compared to the rest of the game, and really if you just simply follow a basic strategy of sort of staying behind her, she's even easier because when she jumps up, she'll come back down and she really won't hit you at all, and you get several slices in or a visceral attack on the head just by doing this basic strategy of staying behind her. But if you don't do that strategy and you actually try to fight the battle, she's a little bit harder, especially when she begins to rip her arms off and attack you with those as well. So stage 2 is definitely a little bit more ferocious, but that's probably true of most bosses in all the Souls games. But AMYGDALA is definitely one of the larger bosses and really going to test the player as far as like their dodging abilities and being able to bait the boss out to land in certain areas to get the best hit in on him. And therefore I think AMYGDALA fits very well as a mid-tier boss because she's not impossible to take out, but is also going to test the player as far as putting into action everything they've learned thus far in the game. And next we come to Father Gascoigne, who is the second boss in the game, or actually the first mandatory boss, but probably the second boss that most players are going to come to, and this is definitely a difficult boss so early in the game. It really tests the player as far as like parry abilities, or use their gun to stun the boss while getting the visceral attack in, and of course there are 2 stages to this boss fight. Stage 1 is definitely going to focus more on the parry part, more like a PvP battle, and then stage 2 is basically one of your traditional giant bosses or a giant werewolf that you're going to go against here. And when you go against this beast, you have to really learn your surroundings as far as like which trees you can hide behind, which part of the fence you can hide behind, which tombstones you can use to your advantage, and also they give you a little hint here as well. You can use a little toy box or a little musical box to sort of weaken the boss a little bit, get some free attacks in. I like how they mix the lore in with that as well, but this makes the boss have a definite weakness, and anytime a boss has a weakness like this, it can't be an upper tier, it's going to be a mid-tier boss because it gives you free opportunity to just sort of wail away and take away a massive amount of health. And so therefore, Father Gascoigne is going to be a mid-tier boss, definitely not on the easier side because it's so hard, especially for new players being the second boss in the game, but definitely not on the far side either, so mid-tier fits perfect for Father Gascoigne. Now in 12th place we have the One Reborn, and this boss here is just a conglomeration of all these undead bodies all strung together, sort of like the Rotten was in Dark Souls 2, but to a much more ferocious form here, and with some really crazy attacks as far as like kicking you back and just simply dropping all these dead vomit on top of your head here. I don't really know how to describe it. It's just sort of a debris that falls on your head. That's really annoying, especially for the second phase of the battle, but he's definitely one of the more difficult bosses, especially since you have all these little maidens across the top of their little bell chimes, and you really need to take all of them out to like basically have any success at the boss at all. So it's a multi-phase boss fight here, so not only is the boss difficult, you also have to do a secondary mission inside the boss arena, and so combine those 2 together, and he's definitely going to be one of the harder bosses in the game. And I know I'm only ranking him mid-tier here, but that just goes to show that every boss after this on the list is going to be one of the hardest bosses you're going to encounter in a Soulsborne game. Now smack dab in the middle here, we're going to go with our first DLC boss of the list. We're going to go with the Living Failures. Now these are sort of like the Celestial Emissaries, except this time they're not going to be super large, they're not going to be super small. They're sort of like a mid-sized alien here, and all these mid-sized aliens have different attacks they can use against you. They also have the ability to summon these giant rocks that come catapulting down from the sky. That they're probably not an instant kill, but it's going to be pretty darn close to an instant kill, especially by the time you get up. One's going to be right on top of you, just sort of knocking you around. And it's just a hard boss to like really gain your footing on, because there's so much going on at one time in the boss arena, and they have such a large health pool. This is definitely the easiest boss in the DLC, but it's still a very difficult boss in the game. I mean, he's already beaten out half of the regular bosses in Bloodborne, but don't go in this boss fight expecting anything like the Celestial Emissaries. Even though they look like the same alien creatures, this boss fight is significantly harder. In 10th and a half place we have the Dark Beast Parl, and yes, I know, why is there a half place here in the middle of the list? Well, it's because I already recorded the entire video and I realized that I left the Dark Beast Parl out, but this is where I would have placed him in the list had I remembered. But Dark Beast Parl is a huge beast with a massive range of attack, intense lightning damage, and can leave any player stumbling away frantically trying to heal themselves back up. The one saving grace against the beast is that if you attack the back legs enough, that he'll collapse like a pile of bones, and you can get so many good hits with a visceral attack in, and it takes away so much of his health. It's not easy to get to this moment, however the game does at least give the players a little bit of hope when fighting against him. Now in 10th place we're going to have another pretty early boss in the game, which is the Blood-Starved Beast, but it is a really difficult boss when you go in here. Stage 1's not like too terrible, but when he comes into stage 2 and he sort of sets up and starts spewing poison everywhere, and you get poison damage on top of your regular damage, you have to worry about trying to pop an antidote in order to get rid of the poison damage, all while he's trying to attack you at the same time. There's just so much going on here, and you're losing so much life so fast, it's just so easy to die in this fight. The game does give you the ability to throw out a blood cocktail, which is really going to help as far as like distracting the Blood-Starved Beast, but if you don't throw that out, you are in for a world of hurt from the poison and just the vicious attacks that he continues to just lay into you with. There is a summon right outside the gate, and that really does help the boss fight quite a bit. However, if you don't go in there for the summon or the blood cocktail, you are just asking for pain in this fight. In 9th place, we have yet another pretty early boss in the game with the VICAR AMELIA, and this is a awesome looking boss. I love the design of this boss. I love the little bite moves that she can do. I love the little claw swipes that she can do. The design is absolutely astonishing for this particular boss. But as amazing as the design is in this game, she is incredibly difficult to beat with her little slashes attack or the bite attack that we mentioned earlier, and all while this is going down, she can also heal herself. Yes, you have your numbing mist that you can try to throw out there, but oftentimes the damage is already done. She's already healed back up, and the numbing mist doesn't even last the entire fight. So you're going to have multiple of them equipped as you go into the boss arena every single time. She's a very powerful attack, has huge range with the slices and the slams, and I wouldn't hesitate to say most players had to fight this boss multiple times before finally advancing in the game. Now in 8th place I'm going to put EBRIETAS, Daughter of the Cosmos here, because I personally found this boss really difficult. She has so many attacks that are just almost like a one-shot kill on you. Like when she shoots out the lasers or sort of charges at you, these attacks do so much damage against your character, and they're so difficult to avoid. The best place you can get to is simply right behind her in the little crevice here. If you stay in there, you're pretty safe, but if you get knocked out that little crevice, you're in for a world of pain if she does one of her two most powerful attacks. And even though she's like huge and almost looks like a slug, she's actually really fast, and so she can take you out pretty darn quick in this battle. I know some players probably wouldn't put her as high on the list here, but every time I get to her, I always dread this fight and I always end up dying multiple times. So to me, 8th place is a perfect location for EBRIETAS. Now in 7th place here I have MARTYR LOGARIUS. I'm going to tell you, the first time I went through the game, this was the hardest boss that I had ever encountered in probably like any game ever. Now in later on playthroughs I was able to take him out a little bit faster, and some of the other bosses proved a little bit more difficult, but the first playthrough it took me forever to beat this guy. He has these crazy powerful attacks with his little scythe here. He can shoot out these little dark magics with these skulls, and he can just fly around the entire environment. It's just so hard to get him to stay in one place to get a lot of attacks in on him. Yes, he looks like an old man here, but there's one thing this game has proved to us: age means nothing when it comes to speed, and we're going to find that out even more later on the list here. In 6th place here we have the Shadows of YHARNAM, and this is definitely the hardest group fight inside the game. Truth be told, almost all the other group fights are a piece of cake, or at least like mid-tier at the hardest, but this boss fight here is definitely one of the hardest group fights in like all of the Souls games. First off, you start off with these 3 hooded knights. They almost look like the characters from Lord of the Rings here a little bit, but one of them has a sword attack, one of them has a flame attack, and one of them has like a magic attack. The only real defense you have here is this giant tombstone in the middle, which you will use that giant tombstone a lot in this battle, but you'll slowly try to whittle away all their different health bars, and if you end up killing one before the other 2, which is naturally going to happen, the other 2 are going to evolve into having even more powerful attacks, such as having snakes sort of jump out of the ground and attack you, or jump out from their arms and attack you. I mean, the battle gets significantly harder after you've taken one of them out. So the best advice is to slowly work all their health down, take one out when the other 2 are just about to die, and the fight will go so much easier. But for having this fight fairly early in the game, such a powerful group fight like this is almost where a lot of players just simply call it quits on the game because they can't get past the shadows of YHARNAM. In 5th place here we have GEHRMAN the First Hunter, and this is definitely where it comes into play of the old people in this game are super fast, because GEHRMAN, especially in that second stage, is like the fastest hunter in this entire game, and the way he zooms across the stage to attack you with his little scythe here, I mean, there's nothing that you can do that's anywhere remotely as fast as that, and he's got to be like 2-3 times your age. I mean, it's crazy here. The way it fights out here is more like PvP instead of PvE, because GEHRMAN has a little gun like you, plays like a hunter like you, can do viscerals on you just like you do on him, can do all the same attacks, just simply faster and more powerful, and with a little bit more magic and pizzazz at the same time. GEHRMAN is definitely a great final boss in the game. It's a great way to end the lore up here. It's a great way to sort of combine what happens at the start of the game with the end of the game. I love everything about GEHRMAN, and it's the perfect final boss in the game, especially if you don't go against the Moon Presence. Even if you don't do the DLC, GEHRMAN's a fantastic boss to finish the base game with. Now, if you're familiar with Bloodborne at all, you're probably noticing that all of the base bosses are already out of the way, and the top 4 bosses are all going to be the DLC bosses, because the DLC bosses for Bloodborne are some of the hardest bosses in any of the Souls games that I've ever seen. These bosses are insane, especially as we get closer to number 1. But at number 4 we have Laurence, the first Vicar, and if you thought Vicar Amelia was hard, you have seen nothing when you come against Laurence here. Stage 1, you're going to fight it pretty similar like how you did against Amelia. Yes, his attacks are a little bit different than hers, but as far as like how you're going to play, it's pretty similar. But stage 2, where Laurence loses the lower half of his body and just becomes a basically lava leaking sack here and sort of journey around the room. He has these amazing powerful attacks on you, leaves a trail of lava behind him, so you really can't get too close to him. It's just so difficult to finally take Laurence out. In 3rd place we have Ludwig the Holy Blade, and I know lore-wise this is probably like the most interesting character in the entire game, and I know aesthetic-wise he's definitely one of the most interesting characters in the entire game, but combat-wise I'm going to put him number 3 on the list here. Now I know he's huge, I know he has powerful attacks, I know he's fast as all get out, however there are a few moments in this fight that are a little bit more easy to punish than the top 2 placements on the list here. Now when Ludwig does enter into stage 2 of the fight, which has the Moonlit Blade, it is way harder, his attacks are way more powerful, but once again there are opportunities to punish him a little bit, and you can also have a summon come into the fight with you if you need to, which is not available on the next 2 parts on our list. So even though I think most players are going to have a really tough time with him, and he's definitely one of the hardest bosses I've ever encountered, there are ways to make him just a little bit easier. In 2nd place I have Lady Maria of the Astral Clocktower. This boss here is the hardest PvP fight that you have in any Soulsborne game. She's up there on the same level as if you encountered someone who invaded your game, who's been playing the game straight for like the last 5 years and never misses a day and has extreme practice and is just going to take you out in no time. Lady Maria is like that player. Her attacks are extremely powerful, she's way faster than you, and in stage 2 she develops all these blood attacks which makes her even more powerful and even faster than she was in stage 1, and your chances of taking her out first try is almost 0. Lady Maria is an extraordinarily difficult boss. The only real saving grace when you go against her is if you can get her against a corner or against a wall, and that sort of prevents some of the teleporting attacks a little bit, but getting her against that wall is a challenge in and of itself. And so to me, this is one of the hardest fights that I've ever encountered in a Souls game. So to me, she's going to be 2nd place on the list of the hardest Bloodborne bosses. And that only leaves one boss left, and is the final boss of the DLC, the Orphan of Kos. This is the hardest boss of any Soulsborne game and any From Software games I've ever come across. This is harder than anything in Elden Ring. This is harder than anything in Demon Souls. All the Dark Souls games. This is the hardest boss that From Software has ever put out, in my opinion. Stage 1 of the fight is somewhat navigable as far as like baiting out which moves you want him to do in order to punish those moves a little bit better, but even some of those moves are hard to predict and you end up getting hit quite a bit in this fight. And then stage 2 comes around and this is the most frantic, chaotic beast I've ever seen in any game. He jumps around the arena at lightning fast speeds, he has crazy powerful attacks, can just sort of hit you out of nowhere and then just keeps wailing on you while you can't get away, and you just watch your HP just disappear as if it was never there to begin with. The Orphan of Kos almost feels like an unfair fight because it's so difficult to predict which moves he's going to do in stage 2 of the battle. Is he going to fly up in the air? Is he going to go attack you? Is he going to throw something at you? You almost never know, and your best bet is just simply to get in there, wail away, hope for the best, stay a little bit behind him, and just sort of back up as fast as you can when he turns around and focuses his attention on you. To me, this is the best possible final boss that From Software could do for Bloodborne because it is almost impossible to defeat, and when you finally beat him, you feel like you've truly conquered Bloodborne. So to me, the Orphan of Kos is a perfect end cap to a perfect game. But do you agree with the list as an overall? Who would you raise the hardest boss in the game? Who would you raise the weakest boss? Let me know in the comments down below if you think I got any of the bosses wrong. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.